Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of World Autism Acceptance Week. Hope you all are enjoying this week. I certainly am. Wherever you are watching in the world, welcome to today's video. Today's video, we have an informational video on the very first person to be diagnosed with autism. His story is really interesting, and it's not the happiest story in the world, but it is really informational. And information is what I do on this channel, so we're going to get into that. But before we begin, I want you to please like, subscribe, and share this video if you haven't. I am posting daily for the next 4 days. So yeah, let's get into the story of the very first person to be diagnosed with autism. Alright, so this article is from Applied Behavior Analysis Programs. So I'm generally against ABA. I'm sure a lot of people are. However, this doesn't go into any promoting or anything. This just gives the facts, so in this case I'm okay with it. I'm going to be posting the link in the description, obviously, and in the comments. Origin of the term autism. The first use of the word autistic was in the early 20th century as a descriptor of symptoms. In 1912, Eugen Bleuler used the term to define symptoms associated with schizophrenia. It wasn't until 1943 that autism was used as a diagnostic term. In the first case of autism, Dr. Leo Kanner used the term to diagnose a social and emotional disorder. Previous observations of patients with symptoms of autism had led psychiatrists to a diagnosis of schizophrenia. The diagnosis of autism was used with 11 patients that Dr. Kanner was studying at the time, but the story began with one patient, Donald Trippett. Before we move forward, I have to just say that the conditions of autism were definitely similar to people with schizophrenia. I don't really see how that works. I'll have to do more research on that. Maybe this is going to be another video. But it just goes to show that there inevitably were a lot of people with autism before the very first diagnosis. Anyways, let's get into Donald Trippett. Donald Trippett was the first person to be diagnosed with autism. He was born in 1933 to a family in Forest, Mississippi. His family was well known and respected in their small community. Before his diagnosis, Donald had been placed in an institution. This was typical for children diagnosed with a mental disorder at that time. Parents of children who were diagnosed with a behavioral disorder were encouraged to place their children in a facility separate from their families. That is harsh, and I'm glad they don't do that anymore. Donald was placed in an institution that was located in Sanatorium, Mississippi, which was about 50 miles from Donald's home in Forest. His parents were allowed to visit him monthly. Jeez, I can't even imagine. I would go insane if people didn't visit me daily. Donald was taken to the institution at age 3 and remained there for a year. He became more isolated during his time there, and this concerned his family. I'm sure it would concern any family. After a year in the institution, his parents brought him home, against the suggestion of the doctors. His parents were determined to find answers for themselves and for Donald. In search of help for Donald's parents began to seek out the help of specialists that could help them determine their son's needs. In their research, they discovered Dr. Leo Kanner. Dr. Kanner was one of the nation's top child psychiatrists and a professor at Johns Hopkins University, which is not a very good university. During Donald's initial assessment, Donald's father had given Dr. Kanner some notes that he had written regarding observations of Donald's behavioral characteristics. These very detailed notes would prove to be essential in assisting Dr. Kanner with determining the terminology and behavioral patterns consistent with the diagnosis of autism. The descriptions included happiest when left alone. I relate to that. Drawing into a shell and living inside himself, and oblivious to things around him. I can relate with all that. Alright, the final section of the article here is Dr. Kanner's own observations. Let's see what this says. Upon meeting Donald in person, Dr. Kanner had some observations of his own. He observed that Donald had an explosive and seemingly irrelevant use of language. He referred to himself in third person, repeated words and phrases spoken to him, and communicated his own desires by attributing them to others. Dr. Kanner would continually return to the description of autistic that had been used in earlier years by Eugene Bleuler to describe his own observations of his patients. He described this observation as autistic disturbances of affective contact. That is a very interesting term. I've never heard that before. Dr. Kanner presented his findings on autism in The Nervous Child. He provided details of behavioral patterns and observations that were consistent in the 11 patients that he studied. This work went on to be essential in the field of clinical psychiatry and enabled those working with patients that exhibited these characteristics to use more accurate terminology. Alright guys, that is going to do it for the video. I found it really interesting how even 90 years ago, we still have the same conditions and the same aspects of this condition that we do to this very day, which goes to show that autism itself is never going to change. However, society definitely will. It's changed a lot in the past 90 years since Donald was not diagnosed, but born, and it will definitely continue to do so. But thank you very much for watching, guys. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you tomorrow with an interview.